My name is Bryson. I am 58 years old, and I am sitting in my truck right now, parked outside the county courthouse, trying to find the courage to walk through those doors. You know, I have worked dangerous jobs my whole life. I have been shocked by electricity, fallen off scaffolding, worked in blazing heat and freezing cold. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what happened when I stepped into that courtroom. My own daughter laughed at me. Right there in front of the judge, she laughed out loud like I was some kind of joke. But here is what I cannot stop thinking about. My son-in-law Derek, he would not even look at me. He turned his face away, and I saw something in his eyes before he did. Shame. Pure shame. He knew something. And what he knew would change everything. Before I tell you this story, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your city or your country in the comments below. I love knowing who is out there listening. And if you have ever felt betrayed by someone you loved, with your whole heart, hit that like button right now. Subscribe if you have not already, and stick with me because what I am about to share with you is something I never thought I would tell anyone. Let me take you back to where this nightmare began. I met Linda at a summer concert in a small town just outside of Columbus, Ohio. I was 25 years old, working my first real job as an apprentice electrician, and she was a nursing student with the most beautiful smile I had ever seen. She was standing near the lemonade stand, laughing with her friends, and something about the way the sunset caught her hair made me forget how to breathe. I walked up to her, and I am not going to lie, I had no idea what I was going to say. But she looked at me with those kind eyes, and somehow the words just came. We talked for 3 hours that night. By the end of the summer, I knew I was going to marry her. We got married the following spring in a little church with white wooden pews and stained glass windows that threw colored light across the floor. We did not have much money back then. Our first home was a 2-bedroom house with a leaky roof and a backyard that was more weeds than grass. But it had a big oak tree in the back, and Linda fell in love with it the moment she saw it. She said that tree would watch over our family, and there was this white picket fence around the front yard that needed painting every single spring. I must have painted that fence a dozen times over the years. But every time I did, Linda would bring me sweet tea and sit on the porch watching me work, and somehow that made every brushstroke worth it. Linda worked as a nurse at the local hospital, pulling long shifts and coming home exhausted, but still smiling. And I worked as an industrial electrician, which meant 12-hour days sometimes, 14 often at night when the factories were not running. It was dangerous work. High-voltage cramped spaces, deadlines that did not care if you were tired. But the pay was decent, and it was enough to give my family the life I wanted them to have. When Meredith was born, I remember holding her for the first time in that hospital room, her tiny fingers wrapped around my thumb, and I felt something shift inside me. It was like everything I had ever done suddenly had a purpose. This little girl was counting on me. And I made a silent promise right there that I would give her everything I never had. I would work as hard as I needed to. I would sacrifice whatever it took. I would be the father she deserved. And I did. For years, I did exactly that. I cannot count the number of times I dragged myself out of bed at 4 a.m, my body aching from the day before, just to put in extra hours so we could afford things like dance lessons and summer camps. There was one time I got a mild electrical shock on the job, bad enough that my arm was numb for 2 days. But I went back to work the next morning because we could not afford for me to miss a shift. I never told Linda how scared I was. I just smiled and said it was nothing. When Meredith was about 12, I got offered a promotion. Supervisor position, better pay, better hours. But it meant relocating to Michigan, and Meredith had just started at a new school where she was finally making friends. I turned it down without even thinking twice. Linda asked me if I was sure, and I told her that no job was worth uprooting our daughter. I would find another way to provide. That same year, Meredith needed braces. The orthodontist said it would cost several $1,000s, and our insurance barely covered a fraction of it. I had this 1968 Mustang that I had been restoring since before I met Linda. It was my pride and joy. Cherry red, original engine leather seats I had reupholstered myself. I sold it to pay for those braces. Meredith never knew. Linda cried when I handed over the keys, but I told her it was just a car. Our daughter's smile was worth more than any car ever could be. There were so many nights I came home after midnight, my boots covered in grease and my back screaming in pain, and I would find Meredith at the kitchen table struggling with her homework. I would sit down next to her, no matter how tired I was, and help her work through it. Math, science, history, it did not matter. I was not always good at explaining things, but I tried. And when she finally understood something, and her face would light up, that made every sleepless night worth it. As Meredith grew up, she became everything Linda and I had hoped for. Smart, beautiful, popular. She got good grades and had plenty of friends. Teachers loved her. We were so proud, but somewhere along the way, I started noticing things that worried me. It started small. She would come home from school talking about her friends' houses, how big they were, how nice their cars were, how her friend's dad had bought her a brand new laptop. She would look around our modest living room with this expression I had never seen before, like she was ashamed of what we had. One memory still burns in my mind. Meredith was 16, and I drove to pick her up from school in my old pickup truck. It was not much to look at rust around the wheel wells, a dent in the bumper from a minor accident years ago. But it ran well, and it had gotten us through a lot of tough winters. I pulled up to the front of the school, and I saw Meredith standing with a group of her friends. When she spotted my truck, her face changed. She looked embarrassed, mortified even. She walked over, quickly got in, and immediately said, "Dad, can you please not pick me up here anymore? My friends are watching." I did not say anything. I just nodded and drove home. But that night, after everyone was asleep, I sat in the garage looking at that old truck and wondered where I had gone wrong. I told myself it was just teenage stuff. She was at that age where fitting in mattered more than anything. She would grow out of it. She would understand someday. Linda was always the one who smoothed things over between us. She would take Meredith aside and remind her of all the things I had done for our family. She would tell her about the promotion I turned down, the car I sold, the overtime I worked. And for a little while, Meredith would be sweet again, grateful again. But it never seemed to last. I kept telling myself it was a phase. I kept believing that one day my little girl would look at me and see not just an old man with calloused hands and a beat-up truck, but a father who would have given his life for her. I kept believing that love would be enough. I did not know then how wrong I was. The day the doctor told us Linda had pancreatic cancer, it felt like the floor dropped out from under my feet. Meredith was 22, freshly graduated from college, just starting her first job at a marketing firm. I remember calling her to tell her the news, and her voice on the other end of the line sounded so distant. She said she would come home as soon as she could. It took her 2 weeks. I quit my job to take care of Linda. After 30 years of working, I walked away from everything to be by her side. The guys at the plant threw me a small going-away party, gave me a card signed by everyone, and I barely made it to my truck before I broke down crying. Not because I was sad to leave the job, but because I knew what leaving meant. It meant Linda was really dying. Those last months were the hardest of my life. I learned how to change IV bags, how to administer medication, how to lift her gently when she needed to be moved. I slept in a chair next to her hospital bed that we had set up in the living room because she wanted to see the oak tree through the window. I held her hand during the long nights when the pain was too much, and I whispered stories about our life together, trying to remind her of the good times. Linda worried about me constantly. Even as her own body was failing her, she would look at me with those tired eyes and say, "Bryson, promise me you will take care of yourself. Promise me you will not let this break you." I promised her, even though I did not know how I would keep that promise. A few weeks before she passed, Linda called a lawyer to the house. She had been thinking about this for a while, she said. She wanted to set up a trust fund for any grandchildren we might have someday. She had some money saved from her years of nursing, plus a small inheritance from her mother. It was not a fortune, but it was enough to make a difference in a child's life. She named me as the trustee, the one who would manage it, and make sure it went to the right purpose when the time came. I did not think much of it at the time. We did not even have grandchildren yet. But Linda wanted it done, so we did it. She signed the papers with a shaking hand, and I signed mine, and the lawyer filed everything away. I remember Linda smiling afterward, looking relieved. She said, "Now I know they will be taken care of, no matter what." The funeral was held on a gray November morning. The church was full of people who loved Linda, nurses she had worked with, neighbors, old friends. Meredith sat in the front row crying into a tissue, and I sat next to her with my arm around her shoulders. I thought we would get through this together. I thought grief might bring us closer. But even at the funeral, something felt off. Meredith cried, yes, but there was something performative about it. She kept checking her phone between sobs, and when I tried to hold her hand, she pulled away, saying she needed space. That was when I first saw Derek. He was standing near the back of the church, tall and polished, in an expensive black suit. Meredith introduced him as her boyfriend, someone she had been seeing for a few months. He shook my hand firmly, looked me in the eye, and said all the right things about being sorry for my loss. But there was something about him I could not put my finger on. Something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Over the next few months, I tried to reconnect with Meredith. I called her every week, sometimes more, but she rarely picked up. When she did, the conversations were short. She was busy with work, she said. Busy with life. I understood. Grief affects everyone differently. I told myself to be patient. But then the calls started to change. Instead of asking how I was doing, Meredith started asking about Linda's estate. How much money was there? What about the house, and what about that trust fund Mom set up? She asked about it again, and each time her voice had an edge to it that made my stomach turn. I explained it to her as clearly as I could. The trust fund was for grandchildren. It was not for her. It was what Linda wanted. But Meredith did not seem to hear me. Or maybe she did not want to. 6 months after Linda's death, Meredith and Derek got married. It was a small ceremony at a fancy venue downtown, the kind of place that charges more for flowers than I used to make in a month. I was invited, of course, but I felt like a guest at a stranger's wedding. Derek's family filled most of the seats. His friends, his colleagues. I sat in the back with a few of Linda's relatives, feeling out of place in my old suit. During the reception, Meredith gave a toast. She talked about her mother, about how Linda had always believed in her, always supported her, always sacrificed for her. She got choked up talking about Mom, and then she sat down without ever mentioning me. Not once. Not a single word about her father. I sat there with a glass of champagne I did not drink, feeling like I had already lost her, even though she was standing right there in front of me. 2 years after the wedding, Meredith called me with news that made my heart soar. She was pregnant. Not just pregnant, but pregnant with twins, a boy and a girl. I remember standing in my kitchen, gripping the phone so hard, my knuckles turned white, tears streaming down my face. Grandchildren. Linda's dream was coming true. Emma and Jacob were born on a warm June morning. I drove 4 hours to be at the hospital, and when the nurse placed Emma in my arms for the first time, I understood something I had not fully grasped before. This is what it feels like to fall in love all over again. She was so tiny, with a tuft of dark hair and the most perfect little fingers. And Jacob, just a few minutes younger, had his grandmother's eyes. I swear I could see Linda looking back at me through them. I made a decision that day. I sold the house in Ohio, the house where I had raised Meredith, the house with the oak tree and the white picket fence that I had painted so many times. I used the money to buy a smaller place just 20 minutes from where Meredith and Derek lived. I wanted to be close to my grandchildren. I wanted to be part of their lives in a way I felt I had not been able to be part of Meredith's. For a while, everything seemed perfect. Meredith and Derek both worked long hours, her at the marketing firm and him at a real estate company, so they needed help with the twins. I became their primary caregiver, picking them up from daycare, taking them to the park, feeding them dinner. It was the happiest I had been since Linda died. Every Thursday, I would take Jacob fishing at a little lake about half an hour from town. It was nothing fancy, just a small pond with a wooden dock and plenty of sunfish that were easy for a little boy to catch. Jacob would get so excited every time he felt a tug on his line. He would yell, "Grandpa, Grandpa, I got one," and I would help him reel it in, watching his face light up with pure joy. We would throw most of them back, but sometimes we would keep 1 or 2 for dinner, and I would teach him how to clean and cook them. Emma was different. She was quieter, more thoughtful. She loved baking just like her grandmother. I found Linda's old recipe box in a drawer one day, and I started teaching Emma how to make some of the things Linda used to make. Chocolate chip cookies, apple pie, banana bread. Emma would stand on a little stool next to me, stirring the batter with a wooden spoon, flour on her nose, looking so much like Linda that it took my breath away. She started calling me Grandpa Bear one afternoon when I was telling her a story about a bear family that lived in the woods. The Papa Bear was big and strong, I said, but he was also gentle and kind. He protected his family and taught his cubs everything he knew. Emma looked up at me with those big eyes and said, "You are like the Papa Bear, Grandpa. You are my Grandpa Bear." And the name stuck. Those were golden days. I felt useful again, purposeful. I felt like maybe all those years of sacrifice had been worth it, because now I got to watch my grandchildren grow up. Now I got to give them the love and attention that Linda and I had always dreamed of giving. But not everything was as perfect as it seemed. I started noticing things about Derek that troubled me. He came home late more often than not, and sometimes I could smell alcohol on his breath when he walked through the door. He would barely acknowledge me, just nod in my direction before heading upstairs. Meredith made excuses for him. "He is stressed from work," she would say. The real estate market is tough right now. One evening, I was in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner when I heard Derek on the phone in the living room. He did not know I was there. He was talking in a low voice, but I caught fragments of the conversation. Something about a deal falling through. Something about money he was expecting. He said, "Do not worry, we will have access to it soon. Just give me a little more time." I did not know what he was talking about then, but a cold feeling settled in my chest, and it did not go away. Around the same time, Meredith started acting differently toward me. She was less grateful, more critical. She complained about how I dressed the kids, how I fed them, what activities I chose. Nothing I did was good enough anymore. And she started limiting my time with Emma and Jacob. Instead of seeing them 4 or 5 days a week, it became 3, then 2. She always had a reason. They have play dates. They need more structure. We want to spend more family time together. I tried to talk to her about it, but she shut me down every time. And when I tried to talk to Derek, hoping maybe he could help smooth things over, he just looked away and mumbled something about staying out of it. That was when I noticed it for the first time. Derek could not look me in the eyes. Not really. There was something there hiding behind his polished smile. Something that looked a lot like guilt. The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon. Meredith's voice was cold, almost clinical. She told me I was no longer welcome to see Emma and Jacob unsupervised. When I asked why, she said that she and Derek had concerns about my ability to care for the children safely. She used words like forgetful and confused. She implied that I was becoming a danger to my own grandchildren. I stood in my kitchen, the phone pressed against my ear, and I could not speak. My own daughter was telling me I was not safe to be around. My own daughter was looking at me and seeing an old man who could not be trusted. It was like being punched in the stomach, except the pain did not fade. It just sat there heavy and cold. I tried to reason with her. I reminded her of all the times I had cared for Emma and Jacob without a single problem. I reminded her that I had just had a full physical, and my doctor said I was in excellent health for my age. But she was not listening. Her mind was already made up. I reached out to Derek, hoping maybe he would be the voice of reason. But when I called him, he sounded nervous, almost scared. He said he would talk to Meredith, but I could tell from his voice that he would not. Whatever was happening, he was part of it. Or at least he was not willing to stop it. A few weeks later, I ran into an old friend at the hardware store. His name was Harold, and we had worked together at the plant years ago. He had retired early and gone to law school, if you can believe that. Now he was a practicing attorney, specializing in estate law. We got to talking, catching up on old times, and I mentioned what was happening with Meredith and the grandchildren. I did not go into detail, but I said enough for him to look concerned. Harold paused for a long moment, then said something that made my blood run cold. "Bryson," he said, "I probably should not tell you this, but someone came to my office a few months ago asking about trust funds, specifically about how to change the trustee of a trust if the current trustee was deemed mentally incompetent." I asked him who it was. He shook his head. "I cannot say. But I think you should look into your family's finances. Something does not smell right." That night, I did something I never thought I would do. I started investigating my own daughter. It did not take long to find out the truth. Derek's real estate business was failing. He had made some bad investments, leveraged properties that lost value, and now he was drowning in debt. He owed money to banks, to investors, to people who did not take kindly to being owed. And Meredith, who had always lived beyond her means, was right there with him. Their house, their cars, their lifestyle, it was all financed on credit that was rapidly running out. And then I understood. The trust fund. Linda's trust fund for the grandchildren. If I was declared mentally incompetent, Meredith would become the trustee, and as trustee, she would have access to the money. Not to spend on Emma and Jacob, but to dig herself and Derek out of the hole they had created. My own daughter was trying to have me declared unfit so she could steal from her own children. I did not sleep that night. I just sat in my chair, staring at the wall, trying to make sense of how everything had gone so wrong. I thought about Linda, about the promise she made me keep, about the trust she had set up with such hope in her eyes. And I knew I could not let them take it. Not for my sake, but for Emma and Jacob's. They deserved better. They deserved what their grandmother had wanted for them. 3 weeks later, the papers arrived. Meredith had filed a petition with the court. She was seeking to have my visitation rights terminated, claiming I posed a risk to the children. And she was requesting a mental competency evaluation, suggesting that I showed signs of cognitive decline and was no longer capable of managing my own affairs, let alone a trust fund. I read those papers 3 times before I could believe what I was seeing. Every word felt like a knife. My daughter had put her name to lies, official lies, documented in a court filing, to paint me as a senile old man who could not be trusted. She had listed incidents that never happened, conversations we never had, behaviors I never displayed. And she had done it all with her signature at the bottom of the page. I sat down at my kitchen table and cried, not loud heaving sobs, but quiet tears that dripped onto those terrible papers and smeared the ink. I cried for the daughter I had raised, the little girl I had sacrificed everything for. I cried for the relationship we would never have now, and I cried for Linda, who had loved Meredith with her whole heart and would have been devastated to see what she had become. But somewhere in the middle of that grief, something else started to grow. Determination. I was not going to let them win. I was not going to let my daughter steal her children's future, and I was not going to let her destroy me in the process. I picked up the phone and called a lawyer. Her name was Patricia, and she had a reputation for being tough as nails, but fair as the day is long. When I told her my story, she listened without interrupting. And when I finished, she said, "Bryson, I have seen a lot of ugly things in family court, but this is particularly vicious. We are going to fight this, and we are going to win. But I need you to be ready. It is going to get harder before it gets better." I told her I was ready. I had to be. Over the next few weeks, Patricia and I built our case. She had me get a full medical workup, including cognitive testing from 3 different doctors. They all said the same thing. I was mentally sharp, physically healthy, and showed no signs of decline beyond what was normal for a man my age. She had me gather character witnesses, people who could testify to my fitness as a grandparent. My neighbors came forward. The children's teachers offered to speak. Even some of Linda's old nursing colleagues volunteered, saying they knew what kind of man I was. Patricia also dug into Meredith and Derek's finances. What she found was damning. Credit card debt in the 6 figures, a mortgage 3 months behind, a business that was hemorrhaging money, and a lifestyle that was completely unsustainable. It was clear as day what they were after. But even with all that preparation, I was terrified. In a courtroom, anything could happen. Judges were human. They could be swayed by tears, by performance, by a pretty face and a sad story. And Meredith was very, very good at performing when she needed to be. The night before the hearing, I could not sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through every scenario in my mind. What if they believed her? What if I lost? What if I never saw Emma and Jacob again? The fear was overwhelming. But then I thought about Linda. I thought about her hand in mine on that last night, her voice weak but steady as she made me promise to protect our family. And I thought about those 2 little faces, Emma with her flower-covered nose and Jacob with his fishing pole, and I knew I could not give up. I would walk into that courtroom and I would fight for them, no matter what. The morning of the hearing, I woke up at 5:00 and could not go back to sleep. I got out of bed and made coffee that I did not drink. I showered and shaved, taking extra care, and then I went to my closet and pulled out the suit I had worn to Meredith's wedding. It still fit, though it was a little loose now. I had lost weight over the past few months. I stood in front of the mirror and straightened my tie, and I tried to see myself the way the judge would see me. An old man in a dated suit. A father fighting for the right to see his grandchildren. I hoped it would be enough. Before I left, I stopped at the dresser where Linda's photo sat in a silver frame. I picked it up and looked at her face frozen in that moment of happiness from our 30th anniversary. "Wish me luck, sweetheart," I said. And then I put the photo down, grabbed my keys, and walked out the door. The drive to the courthouse felt like it took forever and no time at all. I parked in the lot and sat in my truck for 10 minutes, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my heart pounding in my chest. I watched other people walking into the building, lawyers with briefcases, families with worried faces, and I tried to gather the courage to join them. Finally, I stepped out of the truck and made my way inside. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood paneling on the walls, fluorescent lights overhead, rows of hard benches like church pews. Patricia was already there, and she nodded at me as I walked in. She had a stack of folders in front of her, our evidence, our witnesses, our whole case ready to present. And then I saw them.